Did you know there are 3 words that hospice nurses hear over and over again in the final moments before someone passes? Words so consistent, so universal, that nurses who've sat with hundreds of dying patients can predict them almost every single time. A hospice nurse named Diane once told me something I will never forget. She said, "In 22 years of this work, I've heard thousands of last sentences, but almost all of them, no matter the person, no matter their life, boil down to the same 3 words. And when she told me what they were, I sat in silence for a long time afterward, because it changed how I think about death, about love, about everything we spend our lives chasing." The problem is, most people believe the end comes with big dramatic declarations. Movies have taught us to expect long emotional speeches, tearful confessions, entire monologues delivered with perfect clarity. But that's not what actually happens in real hospice rooms. What actually happens is smaller, quieter, and somehow more powerful than anything Hollywood could write. If you're here right now watching this, maybe you're sitting beside someone you love. Maybe you've already heard those words and you didn't know what they meant. Maybe you're afraid of missing them when the time comes. If any of that is true, I want you to know you're exactly where you need to be right now. Today we're going to walk through the 3 words hospice nurses say patients almost always speak before they go. Why those words matter more than any other words spoken in an entire lifetime, and what you should do if you hear them. Please stay until the end, because the 3rd word is the one nurses say breaks them every single time, no matter how many years they've been doing this work. And if you've ever sat with someone in their final hours and heard something that stayed with you, something you never quite understood, this video might finally give you the answer. Before we go further, where are you watching from tonight? If you've ever heard a loved one's final words, or if you're sitting with someone right now who might be close, share your story in the comments, or simply type here so others know they aren't sitting in that silence alone. This space isn't just a video. It's a room where we can all slow down together for a few minutes and understand something most of us are never taught. Let's begin. The first word hospice nurses hear again and again is a name, not a random name, not just anyone. It's almost always the name of someone who has already died, a spouse who passed years earlier, a mother, a father, a child lost too soon, a best friend from childhood. Nurses call this phenomenon nearing death awareness, and it happens so consistently across cultures, across religions, across every type of patient imaginable, that hospice workers stop being surprised by it after their first few years on the job. Diane told me about a man named Walter who hadn't spoken in almost 2 days. His breathing had changed, his eyes stayed closed most of the time. His family had already said their goodbyes, believing he could no longer hear them or respond. And then, in the middle of the night, with only his daughter in the room, Walter opened his eyes, looked toward the corner of the room, and said one word: Eleanor. That was his wife's name. She had died 11 years earlier. His daughter told Diane later that her father's face changed the moment he said it. The tension that had been sitting in his jaw for days simply melted away. He looked, in her words, relieved, like someone had finally walked into the room after a long wait. He passed 6 hours later. Nurses see this pattern so often that many of them will gently ask families, "Has he mentioned anyone lately, someone who's already passed?" Because when that name comes, it usually means the person is beginning to sense a presence, a pull, a doorway opening that the rest of us in the room simply cannot see. Some families find this terrifying. They think it means confusion, hallucination, a mind slipping away. But most hospice nurses will tell you something different. They'll tell you this isn't confusion at all. It's clarity. It's the mind and the heart working together in those final days, beginning to reach toward whoever is waiting on the other side. If you've ever heard someone say a name that didn't belong to anyone in the room, someone who had already passed, I want you to type the word name in the comments right now. It helps other people watching feel less alone in what they witnessed. And honestly, it helps all of us understand just how universal this moment really is. The second word hospice nurses hear consistently is home. Sometimes it's a full sentence, "I want to go home." Other times it's just the single word, whispered, almost confused, even when the person is lying in the very house they've lived in for 40 years, surrounded by their own furniture, their own photographs, their own life. Families often panic when they hear this. They assume their loved one is disoriented, that they don't recognize their surroundings anymore, and it breaks their heart because they think they've somehow failed to make this final chapter feel familiar and safe. But nurses who've spent decades at bedsides understand this word differently. They believe home in these final days rarely means a physical address. It means something deeper, a feeling of safety, a return to comfort, a yearning that isn't about geography at all, but about peace. One nurse described a woman named Carol who kept saying she wanted to go home, even though she was in fact home, in her own bedroom, in her own bed. Her daughter kept gently reminding her, "Mom, you are home, you're right here," but it didn't seem to register. It wasn't until the hospice nurse quietly took Carol's hand and said, "It's okay, you're going home soon," that Carol visibly relaxed. Something shifted in her breathing. Her shoulders, which had been tense for hours, finally softened. She wasn't asking to be driven somewhere. She was asking permission, in the only language she had left, to finally let go and travel toward wherever home truly meant to her. This is one of the hardest lessons hospice nurses try to teach families. When someone says they want to go home, don't correct them. Don't argue geography with someone standing at the edge of something none of us fully understand. Instead, meet them there. Tell them it's okay. Tell them home is close. Sometimes that single reassurance is the exact permission a person has been waiting for. If you've ever heard someone ask to go home when they were already there, and it confused you at the time, type the word home in the comments below. You're not alone in not understanding it in the moment. Most of us don't, until someone finally explains it to us the way I'm explaining it to you right now. And now, the third word. The one Diane told me breaks even the most experienced hospice nurses, no matter how many years they've done this work, no matter how many times they've heard it before. That word is thank you. Not goodbye, not I love you, though that comes too, often earlier in the process. In the very last exchanges, in the final hours, or even final minutes, an overwhelming number of dying patients say thank you. Sometimes it's directed at a specific person. Thank you for staying. Thank you for taking care of me. Thank you for not leaving. Other times it's said to no one in particular, almost like it's aimed at life itself, at the years they were given, at whatever they believe comes next. Diane told me about a woman named Ruth who had been in a hospice facility for almost 2 weeks. Ruth's son had barely left her side the entire time, sleeping in a recliner beside her bed, missing work, missing sleep, running on nothing but coffee and fear. On what turned out to be her final morning, Ruth, who hadn't spoken clearly in days, opened her eyes, found her son's face, and said with surprising strength, "Thank you for loving me so hard." Her son later told Diane that those 5 words carried more weight than every conversation they'd had in the previous 40 years combined. She passed less than an hour later. Nurses describe this pattern as one of the most consistent, most sacred moments they witness. It's not regret. It's not fear. It's gratitude, spoken at the exact threshold between this life and whatever comes after it. And here's what's remarkable. This gratitude often appears even in patients who struggled with anger, bitterness, or unresolved family pain throughout their illness. Something happens in those final hours that softens even the hardest edges. If you've ever heard someone say thank you in their final moments, or if you've said it yourself to someone you loved who was dying, I want you to type the word thankful in the comments. Let this be a space where we honor that word together because it deserves to be honored. Here's what I want you to take from all of this. If you're sitting beside someone right now, don't wait for a name, a word about home, or a thank you to prove that this moment matters. But if you do hear one of these words, don't correct it, don't rush past it, and don't be afraid of it. A name isn't confusion, it's a reunion beginning. The word home isn't disorientation, it's a request for permission. And thank you isn't a formality, it's the truest sentence a person can offer at the very edge of their life. If someone you love is nearing this point, don't wait for the perfect words to come from you first. Say what's in your heart now, while they can still hear you, because hearing is often the very last sense to go. Hold their hand, let them see your face. Let them feel that they are not walking through that door alone. Because in the end, it was never about the big speeches or the perfect goodbyes we see in movies. It's about presence. It's about being close enough to hear the whisper when it finally comes. If this touched something in you tonight, leave a comment and simply say, "I'm listening." Or share the name of someone you loved and lost and the words they left you with. If you'd like more stories like this one, honest, gentle, and full of the truths nurses rarely get to share, consider subscribing so we can keep having these quiet, important conversations together.